I have spent enough years on this earth to know one thing for certain. When a person shows up at your door carrying something heavier than they can hold alone, you find out real quick what kind of man you are. Most folks never get tested that way, but some of us do. And I was there the summer a stranger walked out of the desert and changed everything for a man who thought he had nothing left to give. And the woman came out of the heat shimmer like something the land itself had conjured. Elias Stone set down his hammer. His dog lifted its graying muzzle, but did not bark. That silence was what made him look twice. She walked slow, too slow, at each step a negotiation with her own legs. Against her chest, she held a bundle wrapped in red and black wool, and the bundle was not moving. 40 yards, 30, 20. He could see her face now. Young, maybe 25 winters, but her eyes carried something far older. Dust coated her deerskin dress. Her moccasins had worn through at the soles. She stopped at his fence line and waited for him to speak first. She did not beg. She did not weep. She simply stood there, swaying, and let him decide. If this story found you tonight, let us know where you are watching from. And if you have been enjoying these tales without subscribing, we would be honored to have you join us. Just a small click that helps us keep sharing stories like this one. The boy's breath rattled like dry beans in a gourd. Elias heard it from where he stood, 3 feet away, and the sound crawled up his spine. He had heard that rattle before, knew what it meant. How long? His voice came out rough, unused. The woman's cracked lips moved. 2 days, maybe 3. She swayed again. Her knees buckled, and she caught herself on the fence post, fingers white against the weathered wood. The boy's head lolled against her shoulder. Elias did not move. Inside his chest, something pulled in 2 directions at once. The cabin behind him held ghosts. The bed where his wife had sweated through her last night. The quilts she had stitched with her own hands. He had not let anyone touch them in 3 years. But the boy's chest rose, fell, rose again, each breath a small war. Bring him inside. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. The woman looked at him, not with gratitude. There was no room for that in her face, just a kind of fierce focus, the look of someone who had walked 20 miles on bleeding feet and would walk 20 more if she had to. She tried to step forward. Her legs gave out. Elias moved without thinking. He caught her arm, felt the heat radiating through her sleeve. No, that was the boy, burning against her chest like a coal wrapped in wool. Give him to me. She hesitated. Her arms tightened around the bundle. I ain't going to hurt him. Something in his voice, or maybe just the exhaustion in her bones, made her loosen her grip. Elias lifted the boy from her arms. Light. Too light for a child his age. The heat coming off him soaked through the blanket into Elias's shirt. Rust whined low in his throat, circling behind them. Elias turned toward the cabin. The door hung open, the way he always left it. Inside, the shadows waited. The bed waited. The ghosts waited. The woman followed, one hand on the fence, then the porch rail, pulling herself along like a woman climbing out of a river. Elias laid the boy on the bed, the quilts pressed against his arms. His wife's stitches, her hands had touched every thread. The boy's eyes fluttered open. Dark, unfocused. They looked past Elias, past the ceiling, at something only fever could see. Then his small hand shot out and gripped Elias's wrist. fingers were burning and strong, stronger than a dying child's fingers should be. The boy's lips moved, one word, a name, but not in English. The woman's hand closed over her son's wrist, gentle but firm, easing his grip from Elias's arm. He calls for his father. Her voice cracked on the last word. She did not explain further. Elias stepped back. The boy's fingers had left white marks on his skin, already fading. He rubbed his wrist without thinking, feeling the ghost of that grip. The cabin pressed in around him, smaller than it had felt in years. The woman knelt beside the bed, her hand on the boy's forehead, her lips moving in words Elias did not understand. A prayer, maybe, or a promise. He made himself move. The well sat 30 paces from the back door. He grabbed the bucket from the hook, walked out into the cooling air, lowered the rope hand over hand. The pulley creaked. Rust followed him, pacing in tight circles, nose lifted toward the cabin. Water sloshed as Elias hauled the bucket up. Cold? Good. He carried it back inside, his boots loud on the pine floor. The woman had not moved. The boy's chest rose and fell in that same shallow rhythm, each breath a small labor. We need to cool him down. Elias set the bucket by the bed. You got anything, medicine? She reached for the pouch at her belt. Her fingers fumbled with the tie exhaustion, making her clumsy, and Elias saw how badly her hands shook. She pulled out a bundle of dried leaves, brownish green, sharp-smelling even from where he stood. Sage? Yarrow? She held them up. My grandmother taught me. Elias nodded toward the shelf above the stove. Willow bark in the jar, the cracked one. Their eyes met. Neither moved for a long moment, and she pushed herself to her feet, swaying, and crossed to the shelf. Her fingers found the jar. She opened it, sniffed, nodded once. Both, she said. Both. Elias fed kindling into the stove. The iron was still warm from the afternoon he had boiled coffee hours ago. Back when the day had been ordinary, the wood caught. He filled the kettle from the bucket, set it on the heat. The woman tore the herbs into smaller pieces, mixing them in her palm. Willow bark, sage, yarrow, something else from her pouch, dark and crumbled, that she did not name. The kettle began to whisper. Elias soaked a cloth in the cool water, wrung it out, and laid it across the boy's forehead. The heat from the child's skin warmed the cloth almost instantly. He soaked it again, wrung it again, laid it down again. The woman brought the tea in a tin cup, steam curling up into the lamplight. She lifted her son's head so careful, like handling something made of paper, and pressed the rim to his lips. Drink, little one. Drink. The boy's throat moved. Once, twice. Tea spilled down his chin, soaking into the quilt. His mother wiped it away with her thumb. Elias watched from the foot of the bed. His wife's quilts. His wife's stitches. A stranger's child, sweating into them. The wrongness of it sat in his chest like a stone. But he did not ask them to leave. Outside, the last light bled out of the sky. The window went from orange to gray to black. Rust settled on the floor near the door. Muzzle on paws, eyes open. The woman looked up. Her face was half shadow now, the lamp behind her throwing her features into sharp relief, cheekbones like carved wood, eyes that had stopped asking for anything. You have not told me your name. she said. Elias. He cleared his throat. Elias Stone. She nodded, as if the name meant something, or meant nothing at all. I am Kaya. The boy coughed, a wet, tearing sound that filled the small room. His body curled inward, small hands clutching at the quilt. And Kaya bent over him, murmuring in her language, her palm flat against his chest. The coughing stopped. The breathing continued. Elias let out air he had not known he was holding. He needs to make it through the night, Kaya said. She did not look up. If the fever breaks by dawn, he will live. Elias pulled the rocking chair from the corner, his wife's chair, the one she had nursed in, the one he had not touched since the burials, and set it beside the bed. Then we wait, he said. Kaya lowered herself into the chair. Her body seemed to fold, all the strength that had carried her across the desert finally giving way. She took her son's hand in both of hers. Elias leaned against the wall. The lamp flickered. The stove ticked as the metal cooled. Outside, a coyote called once, far off, and another answered from somewhere closer. The night stretched ahead like a road with no markers. Sometime after midnight, Elias could not say how long Kaya spoke again. Her voice came from somewhere deep, almost beneath hearing. His father died of this same fever. 2 seasons passed. Elias said nothing. I buried him on a hill facing east, so he would see the sunrise. The words hung in the air, not asking for comfort, just placing a fact between them, the way you might set a stone on a grave. Elias thought of the cottonwood tree, the 2 mounds beneath it. He had not put markers on them, had not been able to carve the names, but he knew where they were, could walk to them in the dark. I know about burying, he said. Kaya's eyes found his in the low light. He could not read what was in them. But something passed between them, a recognition. Maybe. The kind that did not need explaining. The boy's breathing shifted. Faster now. Shallower. Kaya's hand tightened on his. Her shoulders went rigid. Elias pushed off the wall. The cloth. It is not enough. Her voice had changed. Thin. Afraid. The fever is climbing. He could see it now. The boy's face glistening. His small body trembling beneath the quilt. The rattle in his chest had grown louder. Each breath a fight. Elias grabbed the bucket. The water was no longer cold. He looked at the door, at the darkness beyond. The well was 30 paces out. The night was black, and the boy's breathing was getting worse with every passing second. Elias ran. The bucket banged against his leg as he crossed the yard. No moon. Stars thick overhead, but giving nothing useful. Just cold points of light that made the shadows deeper. He found the well by memory, by the feel of packed earth under his boots, changing to the flat stone tones he had laid years ago. The pulley rope burned his palms. He hauled fast, water sloshing over the rim before the bucket cleared the lip. Half the load spilled on the ground. He did not stop to care. Back across the yard, Rust paced beside him, a gray shape moving through the dark. The cabin door stood open, a yellow rectangle of lamplight. Inside. Kaya's voice rose and fell in words Elias did not understand. Not a prayer this time. Something faster, urgent. He pushed through the door. The boy had thrown off the quilt. His small body twisted on the mattress, spine arching, heels digging into the sheets. Sweat soaked through his tunic, plastering the fabric to his ribs. Kaya held his shoulders down, her face tight with effort. "The cloth," she said. "Now." Elias dumped the bucket beside the bed, water splashing onto the floor, darkening the pine boards. He grabbed the cloth, plunged it into the cold, wrung it once, and pressed it to the boy's chest. The child gasped. His eyes flew open wide, unseeing, the whites showing and his back arched higher. "Hold him." Elias leaned his weight onto the boy's shoulders while Kaya soaked a second cloth and laid it across his forehead. The heat coming off the child's skin was wrong, not human, like touching a stove lid. "More water on his wrists," Kaya said. "The inside, where the blood runs close." Elias did it. The boy's pulse fluttered beneath his fingers, fast and thin, a bird trapped in a small cage. The minutes stretched. Elias lost count of how many times he soaked the cloth, wrung it, pressed it down, soaked it again. His shoulders ached. His knees ached where they pressed against the hard floor. The lamp burned lower, the flame guttering, and he realized no one had trimmed the wick. The boy's thrashing slowed, then stopped. Kaya's hands froze on her son's face. Elias felt his own breath catch. The child lay still, eyes closed, chest motionless. 1 second, 2, and then the small chest rose, fell, rose again. The breathing had changed. Still shallow, but steadier now. The rattle in his lungs had quieted to a whisper. Kaya made a sound, not a word, not a sob. Something between. Her forehead dropped to the edge of the mattress. Her shoulders shook once, then went still. Elias sat back on his heels. His hands dripped water onto the floor. The cold had soaked through his shirt, through his skin, but he did not move to dry himself. Outside. The coyote called again, closer this time. Rust lifted his head toward the window, ears pricked, but did not growl. The lamp flame steadied. Elias looked at the woman bent over her son. Her hair had come loose from its binding, falling across her back in a dark wave. Her breathing matched her child's, now slow, deep. The rhythm of someone who had been holding on for days and was finally letting go. He pushed himself to his feet. His knees popped. He crossed to the stove, more for something to do than from cold, and fed another stick of kindling into the coals. The wood caught with a soft crackle. "He is past the worst." Kaya's voice came muffled against the mattress. She did not lift her head. "You sure? The fever is still there, but it is no longer climbing." She sat up slowly, pushing her hair back with both hands. Her face was drawn, skin stretched tight over bone, but something had eased in her eyes. "Now we wait for dawn." Elias looked toward the window. Black, not even a hint of gray on the horizon. "Long time till dawn?" "Yes." He pulled the chair closer to the stove and lowered himself into it. The wood creaked beneath his weight. The fire popped, sending a brief shower of sparks up the chimney. Kaya stayed by the bed, her hand resting on her son's chest, feeling each breath. The silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, just there, like the darkness outside, like the heat from the stove, like the smell of sage and yarrow still hanging in the air. "You should sleep," Elias said. "I cannot. You walked 2 days, maybe 3. You ain't slept since before that, I'd wager." She did not answer. Her fingers traced small circles on the boy's tunic, over his heart. Elias leaned his head back against the chair. The ceiling beam swam in the low light. He could feel his own exhaustion pulling at him, a weight settling into his bones. But he did not close his eyes. "Your grandmother," he said. "She taught you the medicine." "Yes, she Apache too." Kaya's hand paused. "My grandmother was Chiricahua. My mother was Mescalero. My father—" She stopped, took a breath. "My father was a scout for the army. He learned English from the soldiers. He taught me that why you speak it so good, that, and the mission school for 2 winters. When I was young." A pause. "They wanted to make us forget who we were. I remembered anyway." Elias watched the firelight play across the walls. The shadows of the hanging pots shifted with each flicker. "My wife," he said, and the word felt strange in his mouth after so long. She used to talk in her sleep, German words. Her folks came over from the old country when she was little. She forgot most of it when she was awake, but asleep, it came back. Kaya turned to look at him. Her eyes reflected the lamplight, 2 small flames. "She is gone." 3 years, Elias swallowed. Her and the boy. Same fever that took them. The words hung in the air. He had not said them out loud since the burials, had not said them to anyone. The preacher had come and gone, speaking words Elias did not hear. The neighbors had brought food he did not eat, and then everyone had left him alone, the way he wanted. Until now. Kaya nodded slowly, not pity in her face. Something else. Recognition. "That is why you know about the cooling. The cloths." "Didn't work then." His voice roughened. "Maybe it'll work now." She looked at her son. The boy's face had lost some of its flush. His breathing came easier, each rise of his chest a little deeper than the last. "It is working," she said. Elias said nothing. He stared at the fire, at the coals glowing red beneath the grate, and felt something shift in his chest. Not hope. He did not trust hope, but something. The night crept on. Sometime later, Elias could not say when Kaya began to hum, low, barely there, a melody that rose and fell like breath. The boy's hand twitched in his sleep, his fingers curling and uncurling, but his face stayed calm. The humming faded. The lamp burned to its last inch of oil. Elias got up to refill it, moving quietly, pulling the tin of coal oil from the shelf beneath the window. The smell hit his nose sharp and familiar. He poured carefully, tilting the lamp to check the level. When he turned back, Kaya's eyes were closed. She had not moved from her spot beside the bed. One hand still rested on her son's chest, but her head had tipped forward, chin nearly touching her collarbone, and her breathing had gone slow and deep. Asleep. Elias stood there, lamp in hand, watching the 2 of them. Mother and child, strangers in his house, in his bed, in the quilts his wife had made. He should feel something about that. Anger, maybe, resentment. But he searched for it and found only a kind of quiet. The boy's eyes opened. Elias froze. The child looked at him, straight at him, clear and focused. The fever fog lifted for just a moment. Dark eyes, serious, taking measure. Then the boy spoke. One word, clear as water. "Father." The word hit Elias like a fist to the chest. He stood frozen, the lamp still in his hand, its flame throwing shadows across his face. The boy's eyes held his dark, clear, waiting. "No," Elias said. His voice came out rough. "No, I ain't." Kaya stirred, her head lifted, sleep falling away in an instant, and she saw her son's open eyes. A sound escaped her throat, something between a gasp and a cry, and she gathered the boy into her arms. "You are here," she whispered. "You are here." The boy's gaze stayed on Elias for one more heartbeat. Then he turned his face into his mother's shoulder. Elias set the lamp down on the table. His hands were not steady. The window had gone from black to gray. Dawn coming, slow and pale. The sky lightening by degrees, and he had not noticed. His fever. He forced the word out. Kaya pressed her palm to the boy's forehead, held it there, her eyes closed. Lower. Her voice shook, much lower. The boy's fingers curled into the fabric of her dress. He did not speak again, but his breathing came easy now, deep and even, the rattle in his chest gone quiet. Elias walked to the door and pulled it open. The morning air hit his face, cool and clean, smelling of sage and dust and the faint sweetness of the cottonwood leaves. The sky blushed pink along the eastern ridge. Rust stood in the yard, nose lifted, watching the dawn spread. Elias leaned against the doorframe. His legs felt hollow, his eyes burned from the long night without sleep. Behind him, he heard Kaya murmuring to her son, soft words in her own language. The boy answered once, 2 syllables, his voice thin as paper. He had called Elias father. The word echoed in the hollow place behind Elias's ribs. He gripped the doorframe until the rough wood bit into his palm. His son had been 2 years old when the fever took him, still learning to talk. He had never called Elias anything but Da, just Da, over and over, reaching up with fat fingers, laughing at nothing. Elias pushed off the doorframe, walked out into the yard. The cool air filled his lungs, sharp and real. Rust trotted over, pressing his muzzle against Elias's knee. The cottonwood tree stood at the far end of the yard, its leaves catching the first gold of sunrise. Beneath it, the 2 Mims. He had not put markers on them, could not. He stood there, looking at the tree, until the sun cleared the ridge and the shadows shortened, and the warmth began to seep into his bones. Footsteps behind him, light, uneven. "He is sleeping again," Kaya's voice, quiet. "True sleep. The fever is breaking." Elias did not turn. Good. Silence. Then he did not know what he was saying. "When he called you, I know. His father looked nothing like you. But you were there, in the dark, and he was lost in the fever. And I said, I know." Kaya stopped talking. She stood a few feet behind him, close enough that he could hear her breathing. The cottonwood leaves rustled. "You have graves here," she said. Not a question. "Yes. May I see them?" Elias turned then. She stood in the morning light, her deerskin dress rumpled and stained, her hair tangled around her shoulders. The exhaustion was still there, written in every line of her face, but her eyes were steady. He walked toward the cottonwood. She followed. The 2 mounds lay side by side, covered in the yellow grass of late summer. No stones, no markers, just the earth, settled and quiet, beneath the spreading branches. Elias stopped at the edge. "My wife," he said. "Sarah, and my boy, Thomas." Kaya stood beside him. She did not speak, did not offer words of comfort or prayers, or any of the things people usually said. She simply stood there. After a long moment, she knelt. Her hands pressed flat against the earth over the smaller mound. She closed her eyes. Elias watched her. The morning light caught the turquoise beads at her throat, turning them to blue fire. "What are you doing, bailing them?" Her eyes stayed closed. "Telling them that their home has given shelter, that their sacrifice is not forgotten." Elias's throat tightened. He looked away, toward the ridge, toward the sky, emptying itself of stars. When Kaya rose, her hands were dusty. She brushed them against her dress, leaving faint prints on the leather. "They hear you," she said. "The ones we bury. They hear?" Elias said nothing. He did not know if he believed that, but he did not argue. They walked back to the cabin together. The sun climbed higher, warm on their shoulders. Rust circled ahead, sniffing at the tufts of dry grass. Inside, the boy lay curled beneath the quilt, his breath slow and peaceful. His face had lost the gray pallor of the night before. Color crept back into his cheeks. Faint, but there, Kaya knelt beside the bed. She smoothed the hair from her son's forehead. "He will need food when he wakes. Broth, if you have it. Something easy. I can manage that." Elias moved to the stove. The fire had burned down to coals. He fed it new wood, stirred the embers, and pulled the dented pot from the shelf. Dried beef in the pantry, salt, water from the bucket. The domestic work steadied him. He had done this 1,000 times, built fires, made meals, kept the small machinery of life running. It was easier than thinking, easier than feeling. The broth began to simmer, filling the cabin with the smell of salt and meat. Kaya sat in the rocking chair now, his wife's chair. Her eyes tracked Elias as he moved around the cabin, but she did not speak. The boy stirred. "Mama." Kaya leaned forward instantly, her hand finding his. "I am here." The boy's eyes opened, clearer now, focused. He looked around the cabin, the beams overhead, the lamp on the table, the quilt bunched around his legs. "Where are we?" "A safe place." Kaya smoothed his hair. "A man helped us. His name is Elias." The boy turned his head. His gaze found Elias standing by the stove, high ladle in hand. "You helped my mother." Elias cleared his throat. "Reckon I did." The boy studied him. 6 years old, maybe 7. But those dark eyes held a weight beyond his age. Eyes that had seen things. "Thank you," the boy said. Simple, direct, no hesitation. Elias nodded once, turned back to the broth. His hand tightened on the ladle. The morning stretched on. The boy ate slow, careful sips at first, then deeper swallows. Kaya watched every bite, counting each one like coins. Elias cleaned the pot, fed the fire, checked on the horse in the lean-to. Ordinary tasks, ordinary rhythm, but the cabin felt different now, fuller. The silence that had pressed in on him for 3 years had cracked open, and something else was seeping through. Late morning, Rust barked. Elias straightened from the woodpile. The dog stood at the edge of the yard, hackles raised, staring down the road, dust rising. A rider. Elias wiped his hands on his trousers. squinted against the sun. The figure resolved slowly, a man on a bay horse, fence stretcher laid across the saddle, hat pulled low. Tom Hadley. Tom Hadley reined in his horse at the edge of the yard. The bay mare stamped, tossing her head against the flies. Tom sat easy in the saddle, one hand resting on the fence stretcher across his lap, the other loose on the reins. His eyes moved past Elias to the cabin door. Morning. Stone. Tom. Neither man moved. Rust stood between them, hackles still raised, a low growl building in his throat. Easy, Elias said. The dog quieted, but did not relax. Tom shifted in the saddle. His gaze came back to Elias, then flicked again to the cabin. The door stood open, from where Tom sat. He could see straight through to the bed, to the small figure beneath the quilt, to the woman standing beside it. Didn't know you had company. Didn't know I needed to tell you. Tom's jaw tightened. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, hands thick with calluses. He and Elias had been neighbors for 6 years, had shared fence mending and cattle drives and the quiet understanding of men who worked the same hard land, but the look on his face now was something else. Brought back your fence stretcher. Tom lifted the iron tool, held it out. Borrowed it last month. Finally got around to returning it. Elias stepped forward and took the stretcher. The iron was warm from the sun. Appreciate it. Tom did not leave. His horse shifted beneath him, ears twitching. That an Apache woman in your house. Elias set the fence stretcher against the porch rail. Took his time. When he straightened, his face was flat. That's a woman and her sick boy. They needed help. Folks are gonna talk. Let 'em. Tom's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward in the saddle, voice dropping. I ain't trying to start trouble, Elias. You know that. But people got long memories around here. The raids, the burnings. You remember what happened to the Carter place? Not 5 years back. That was Comanche. You think folks are going to care about the difference? Elias felt heat climb the back of his neck. He kept his voice level. I think folks can mind their own business. Tom stared at him for a long moment. Then he straightened, gathering the reins. Just saying, is all. People talk. He turned the mare, paused, looked back over his shoulder. You might want to think careful about what you're doing here. Stone. That's all. The horse moved off. Tom did not look back again. Elias watched until the dust settled and the rider disappeared over the ridge. His hands had curled into fists at his sides. He made himself unclench them. Rust pressed against his leg, whining softly. It's all right, Elias said. The words felt hollow. He turned back to the cabin. Kaya stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame. Her face gave nothing away, but her eyes tracked the place where Tom Hadley had vanished. He is a neighbor, was. Kaya nodded slowly. She stepped back into the cabin, and Elias followed. The boy had pushed himself up against the pillows. He looked better, the flush fading, the eyes clearer, but his gaze moved between his mother and Elias, picking up on something. The man on the horse, he said. He does not like us. He doesn't know you. Elias crossed to the stove, poured himself coffee from the pot. The liquid was bitter and cold. He drank it anyway. He knows enough. Kaya moved to the window, looking out at the empty yard. He knows what we are. Elias set the cup down. What you are is a mother with a sick child. That's all anyone needs to know. That is not how it works. Her voice was quiet, without accusation, just fact. Not here, not anywhere. The boy watched them, eyes moving back and forth, 6 years old. And he understood more than a child his age should. Elias walked to the door, looked out at the yard, at the ridge, at the sky beginning to deepen toward noon. The heat of the day was building now, pressing down on the land. "I've lived here 6 years," he said without turning. "Built this cabin with my own hands. Dug that well. Strung that fence. Buried my wife and son under that tree. This is my land. Mine." Kaya said nothing. "And on my land, I say who stays and who goes." He turned to face her. "You and the boy stay, long as you need." Something moved in her eyes. Not gratitude. She was too proud for that. But something. "And when the man comes Besuma, when others come, then I'll deal with it." The boy pushed the quilt off his legs. His mother moved instantly, pressing him back. "You must rest." "I am tired of resting." His voice was thin but stubborn. "I want to see outside." Kaya looked at Elias, a question in her eyes. "Let him," Elias said. "The fresh air won't hurt." She hesitated, then helped her son to his feet. The boy swayed, one hand gripping his mother's arm, but he stayed upright. Together, they walked to the door. The boy stood on the threshold, blinking in the sunlight. His bare feet pressed against the worn boards of the porch. He looked out at the yard, the fence, the ridge beyond. "It is big," he said. "What is be the sky here?" He tilted his head back, squinting at the blue. "At home, the mountains press in. Here, the sky goes forever." Elias looked at the boy, at the wonder in his face. "Yeah," he said. "I suppose it does." Rust padded over to the porch. He sniffed at the boy's feet, then sat down beside him, tail sweeping the boards. The boy reached down and touched the dog's head. His fingers were small and tentative, tracing the gray around Rust's muzzle. "He is old. Getting there." "What is his name? Rust." The boy smiled. It was the first time Elias had seen him smile. "Rust," the boy repeated. "Like the color." Like the color. Kaya stood behind her son, one hand on his shoulder. Her eyes met Elias's over the boy's head. Something passed between them, an understanding, unspoken. The boy looked up at Elias. "My name is Nahuel. It means sunrise in my mother's language." "Sunrise." Elias nodded. "That's a good name." Nahuel turned back to the yard, to the sky, to the endless blue stretching overhead. His hand rested on Rust's head, and the dog leaned into his touch. The moment held. Then, from inside the cabin, a sound, the clatter of hooves, distant but growing. Elias straightened. Kaya's hand tightened on her son's shoulder. Not one rider this time. 3 horses crested the ridge, coming fast down the road toward the cabin. Sunlight glinted off metal. A badge. The sheriff had come. Elias stepped off the porch. "Get inside," he said without looking back. Kaya pulled Nahuel into the cabin. The door did not close. Elias heard her footsteps stop just inside the threshold. Watching. The 3 riders slowed as they entered the yard. Dust rose around the horses' hooves and hung in the still air. The man in front wore a tarnished star on his vest, half hidden beneath a coat gone gray with trail dirt. Sheriff Cole. 60 years old, maybe more, with a face like leather left too long in the sun. The two men flanking him were younger. One Elias recognized a deputy named Garrett, thin and sharp-eyed. The other was a stranger, thick through the chest, hands resting easy on his saddle horn. Sheriff Cole reined in his horse 10 feet from the porch. His eyes moved past Elias to the open doorway, then back. Elias Stone. Sheriff. Cole shifted in his saddle. The leather creaked. Got word you're harboring some folks out here. Apache woman and a child. Got a sick boy and his mother. They needed help. That's so. Cole's voice was flat. Not hostile, not friendly, just measuring. Mind if we take a look? Elias planted his feet. Mind telling me why? The deputy Garrett leaned forward. There's been talk. Stone, woman matching that description. Traveling with a boy. Some folks are saying she might be connected to trouble up north. Raiding party hit a supply wagon near Prescott last month. She walked here from the mesa, on foot, carrying a dying child. Elias kept his voice level. You think she had time to raid a wagon? We're just asking questions. Sheriff Cole raised a hand, quieting Garrett. Nobody's accusing anyone of anything, but I got a job to do. And part of that job is checking on things when people get nervous. People meaning Tom Hadley. Cole's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes, meaning concerned citizens. Elias felt the heat building in his chest. He forced it down. The boy nearly died last night. Fever took him bad. He's just now getting his strength back. His mother hasn't slept in 3 days. You want to ride in here and drag them out for the questioning because Tom Hadley's got a nervous disposition. Easy now. Cole held up both hands. Nobody's dragging anyone anywhere. I just need to see them. Talk to them. Make sure everything's on the level. Elias did not move. The moment stretched. The horses steeped. A fly buzzed past Elias's ear. Then Kaya's voice came from the doorway. I will speak with him. Elias turned. She stood in the threshold, Nahuel behind her, one hand gripping her dress. Her face was calm, but her shoulders had gone rigid. You don't have to. I will speak with him. She stepped onto the porch. It is better this way. Sheriff Cole dismounted. His boots hit the dirt with a heavy thud. He walked toward the porch, slow, his hands visible at his sides. Ma'am. Kaya met his gaze. Sheriff, mind telling me where you came from? The Mesa, east of here. 2 days' walk. And before that, the San Carlos. Her voice was steady. My husband was a scout for the army. He died 2 seasons past. When the sickness came, my son fell ill. There was no medicine left. I walked to find help. Cole studied her. His eyes moved to Nahuel, still half hidden behind his mother. The boy yours not? Yes. He got a name. Kaya hesitated. Her hand found her son's shoulder. Nahuel. Cole nodded slowly, where he looked at Elias, then back at Kaya. Ma'am, I'm going to be straight with you. There's folks in town who don't like the idea of an Apache woman staying out here. They got long memories. Some of them lost family in the troubles. I lost family too. Kaya's voice did not waver. My husband, my mother, my grandmother. I am not here to make trouble. I am here because my son was dying, and this man, she nodded toward Elias, was the only one who would help. The words hung in the air. Sheriff Cole rubbed the back of his neck. He looked tired, old, the weight of his job pressing down on him. I believe you, ma'am. I do. He glanced at the two men still mounted behind him. But that don't help me keep the peace. What are you saying? Elias stepped forward. I'm saying it might be better for everyone if the woman and the boy moved on. Sooner rather than later. Cole held up a hand before Elias could speak. I ain't ordering nothing. Just advising. The territory's unsettled. Feelings are running high. You keep them here. You're gonna draw attention you don't want. Elias's hands curled at his sides. And if I don't care about attention, then that's your keys. Cole turned back to his horse. But choices got consequences. Stone, you've been out here alone a long time. Might be you forgot what it's like to have neighbors watching every move you make. He mounted up. The leather creaked. Think about what I said. He touched his hat brim. Ma'am. Stone. The three riders turned and headed back up the road. The dust rose behind them and slowly settled. Elias stood in the yard, watching them go. His heart pounded against his ribs. His jaw ached from clenching. Kaya came down from the porch. She stopped beside him, close enough that he could feel the heat of her through his shirt. He is not a bad man, she said. No, but he is afraid. Ain't afraid. Just careful. There's a difference. Kaya shook her head. There is no difference. Not in the end. Nahuel appeared in the doorway. His face was pale, the brief strength of the morning already fading. Mama, are we leaving? Kaya looked at Elias. Her eyes asked the question she would not speak aloud. Elias looked at the boy, at the woman, at the cabin behind them, the graves beneath the cottonwood, the land stretching out in every direction. His land. No, he said. You're not leaving. Kaya's shoulders dropped a fraction. Not relief, she was too proud for relief. But something. The sheriff will come back. Maybe. And the others. The ones who are afraid. Let them come. She studied his face for a long moment. Then she nodded once and turned back to the cabin. Nahuel took her hand as she passed, and together they disappeared inside. Elias stayed in the yard. The sun beat down on his shoulders. The dust settled around his boots. Rust came and pressed against his leg. And Elias dropped a hand to the dog's head without thinking. He had made a choice. He knew that. Felt the weight of it settling into his bones. But for the first time in 3 years, the weight did not feel like a burden. It felt like something else. The afternoon passed. Elias worked the fence line, Nahuel watching from the porch, Rust lying beside him. Kaya moved through the cabin, cleaning, organizing, making the small space her own without asking permission. They ate supper as the sun went down, beans and cornbread. Simple fare, eaten in silence that was not uncomfortable. After, Elias sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. Kaya joined him, settling into the rocking chair that had been his wife's. They did not speak. The night deepened. Somewhere far off, a coyote called, another answered. Then Kaya spoke, her voice low. I will not stay forever. Elias looked at her. When Nahuel is strong, we will go, find a place of our own. I will not be a burden. You ain't a burden. I am a danger. She met his eyes. You know this. The sheriff knows this. Everyone knows this except you. Elias was quiet for a long moment. My wife used to say something, he said finally. She said the measure of a man ain't what he does when it's easy. It's what he does when it's hard. Kaya said nothing. This is hard, Elias continued. I know that. But I buried my wife and my son under that tree. And I spent 3 years doing nothing but surviving. Just getting through. I'm tired of just getting through. He looked out at the darkness, at the stars, at the land he had worked and bled for. You and Nahuel, you gave me something, a reason to do more than survive. I ain't ready to give that up. Kaya's hand moved in the darkness, found his arm, rested there, light as a breath. You are a strange man, Elias Stone. Been told that before. Something that might have been a smile crossed her face. Then it was gone, swallowed by the dark. They sat together, watching the night, until the stars wheeled overhead and the moon rose pale and thin over the ridge. Inside the cabin, Nahuel coughed. Once, twice, a third time. Kaya was on her feet instantly. Elias followed. The boy sat up in bed, his face pale in the moonlight streaming through the window, his hand pressed against his chest. "Mama," he said, "something is wrong." Kaya's hands flew to her son's forehead. Cool. The fever had not returned. "Where does it hurt?" She pressed her palm to his chest, feeling for the rattle that had plagued him before. Not hurt. Nahuel shook his head. Different, like something is coming. Elias moved to the window. The yard lay silver under the moonlight, empty and still. Rust stood on the porch, hackles raised, staring toward the road. The dog was not barking. That was worse. "Stay here," Elias said. He crossed to the corner where he kept his rifle. The Winchester was old but clean, well-oiled, loaded. He had not fired it in over a year. His hands remembered the weight. Outside, Rust's growl dropped to something low and continuous. A warning. Elias stepped onto the porch. The night air hit his face, cool and sharp with the smell of sage. The moon threw long shadows across the yard. Nothing moved. Then he saw them. 3 figures at the edge of his fence line, on foot, dark shapes against the silver grass. Not the sheriff. The sheriff would have ridden. Elias raised the rifle to his shoulder. "That's far enough." The figures stopped. One of them stepped forward, hands raised. "Easy, Stone. We ain't here for trouble." The voice was familiar. Elias squinted against the moonlight. "Tom Hadley." "Tom." Elias did not lower the rifle. Kind of late for a social call. Kind of late for a lot of things. Tom stepped closer. The moonlight caught his face tight, drawn, something working behind his eyes. "We need to talk." "Seems like we already talked. This morning." "That was different." Tom glanced back at the 2 men behind him. "That was before I went home and couldn't sleep. Before I started thinking about what I was doing." Elias's finger rested on the trigger guard. "And what were you doing?" "Tom, being afraid." The words came out hard, like something Tom had to force past his teeth. "Being stupid, letting fear make me into something I ain't." The 2 men behind Tom shifted. One of them, Elias, recognized him now as Garrett. The deputy spoke up. "Tom, maybe we should..." "Shut up, Garrett." Tom did not turn around. His eyes stayed on Elias. "I talked to the sheriff after he left here. Told him what I'd seen. Got him all riled up about raiders and danger and such. And then I went home. And I sat in my kitchen. And I thought about what I'd done." Elias waited. "My wife died 4 years ago." Tom's voice roughened. "Cholera. Took her in 3 days, when she was sick. Really sick. I rode to every neighbor in 20 miles looking for help. Most of them turned me away, afraid of catching it, afraid of bringing it home to their own families. He took another step forward, close enough now that Elias could see the lines around his eyes, the gray in his stubble. One man helped me. You remember who that was? Stone. Elias's grip on the rifle loosened. I remember. You sat with her 3 nights running, brought medicine from town, held her hand when she... Tom's voice broke. He looked away, jaw working. When she passed, you helped me dig the grave. You didn't have to do any of that, but you did. The night pressed in around them. The coyotes had gone silent. Even Rust's growling had stopped. And now here I am, Tom continued, running my mouth about a woman and a sick child, trying to get them run off your land. Kind of a man does that make me? Elias lowered the rifle. A scared one. Yeah. Tom nodded slowly. A scared one, but that ain't an excuse. I know better. I was raised better. He looked at the cabin, at the window where Kaya's silhouette was visible, watching. I came out here to say I was wrong and to tell you that whatever happens, you got at least one neighbor who ain't gonna make trouble for you. Garrett stepped forward. Tom, we should go. This ain't... I said shut up. Tom turned on the deputy. You want to keep whispering in the sheriff's ear, that's your business. But don't expect me to stand with you. Not on this. Garrett's face went hard. He looked at Elias, at the rifle, at the cabin. This ain't over. Stone? Maybe not. Elias met his gaze. But tonight it is. Get off my land. Garrett hesitated. The third man, a rancher named Peters, from the look of him, tugged at Garrett's sleeve. Come on. This ain't worth it. The 2 men retreated into the darkness. Their footsteps faded. Tom stayed. I meant what I said. He extended his hand. I'm sorry, Elias, for all of it. Elias looked at the hand. Calloused, scarred, a working man's hand. He took it. Apology accepted. They shook once, firm. Then Tom stepped back. If you need anything, supplies, help with the fence. Someone to watch your back when the sheriff comes around again, you let me know. I will. Tom nodded. He turned and walked into the darkness. Following the path the others had taken, Elias stood on the porch, rifle loose in his hands, watching until the shadows swallowed him whole. The door opened behind him. He was one of the men who came today. Kaya's voice was quiet. The one who told the sheriff about us. Yeah. And now he stands with you. Elias turned to face her. She stood in the doorway, Noel behind her. The boy's face pale in the moonlight. People are complicated. Elias set the rifle against the porch rail. Sometimes they do wrong and then try to make it right. That don't erase what they did, but it counts for something. Kaya studied him. Her eyes moved across his face, searching. You believe that I have to. Elias looked out at the darkness, at the land, at the stars scattered overhead. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it? Noel tugged at his mother's hand. Mama, I want to go back to sleep. Kaya lifted him. He was still too light, still weak, and carried him back to the bed. Elias followed, closing the door behind him. The cabin felt different now, smaller somehow, but not in a bad way. The walls held them in instead of pressing them down. Elias checked the fire, added a log, watched the flames catch. You should sleep too, Kaya said. She had settled Nahuel beneath the quilt, tucking the edges around him. You have not rested since we came. Neither have you. I am used to it. Elias pulled the chair closer to the stove. The warmth soaked into his bones. I'll keep watch, just in case. Kaya looked at him across the room. The firelight caught her face, softening the sharp lines of exhaustion. You are a good man. Elias Stone. The words landed somewhere deep in his chest. Don't know about that. I do. She turned back to her son, smoothing the hair from his forehead. Sleep now, little one. We are safe here. Nahuel's eyes were already closing. His breathing evened out, slow and steady. Kaya settled into the rocking chair beside the bed. The chair creaked softly as she moved. The night stretched on. Elias watched the fire, listened to the wind outside, felt the weight of the rifle against his leg, somewhere around midnight. Kaya's breathing changed. She had fallen asleep, chin dipped toward her chest, one hand still resting on her son's arm. Elias looked at them, mother and child, Abmers, strangers who had become something else, something he could not name. He thought about Tom Hadley, about the handshake, about the look in the man's eyes when he admitted he was scared. It took courage to say that, to come back and face the man you had wronged. Maybe there was hope for people after all. The fire crackled. A log shifted, sending sparks up the chimney. Elias's eyes grew heavy. He did not mean to sleep, but his body had its own ideas. The warmth of the fire, the quiet of the cabin, the steady breathing of the woman and child it all pulled at him, dragging him down into darkness. He dreamed of his wife. She stood under the cottonwood tree, holding their son in her arms. She smiled at him, and the smile was sad. It's all right, she said. Let go. He woke to gray light and the smell of coffee. Kaya stood at the stove, stirring something in the pot. Nahuel sat at the table, a cup of broth in front of him. The boy looked up when Elias stirred. You were sleeping, Nahuel said. Mama said not to wake you. Elias rubbed his face. His neck ached from the angle of the chair. How long? Dawn came an hour ago. Kaya poured coffee into a tin cup and brought it to him. You needed the rest. He took the cup. The coffee was hot and strong, cutting through the fog in his head. Anything happened while I was out? Nothing. The night was quiet. Kaya returned to the stove. I made cornmeal. You should eat. Elias pushed himself to his feet. His joints popped and cracked. He crossed to the window and looked out at the yard. The morning was clear. The sky a pale blue washed clean by the night. Rust lay on the porch, muzzle on paws, watching the road. Everything looked normal, but something felt different. It took Elias a moment to realize what it was. The cabin felt like a home. He turned back to the table. Nahuel watched him. Spoon halfway to his mouth, Kaya stood by the stove, morning light catching the turquoise beads at her throat. We should go to town today, Elias said. Kaya's hand paused on the ladle. Town. If you're staying, people need to see you, need to know you're not hiding. He met her eyes. We ride in together, all three of us. Let them look, let them talk, and let them get used to it. Kaya set the ladle down. Her gaze moved to Nahuel, then back to Elias. Is that wise? Maybe not. Elias drained his coffee. But it's right. The buckboard rattled over the rutted road. wheels creaking with each dip and rise. Elias held the reins loose in his hands. Beside him, Kaya sat straight-backed, her hair braided tight, the silver concho belt gleaming at her waist. Between them, Nahuel watched the passing land with wide eyes, one hand gripping the edge of the seat. 2 weeks had passed since the fever broke. The boy had grown stronger each day, his color returning, his appetite fierce. Kaya's feet had healed, though she still favored the left one when she walked, and Elias had patched the second room of the cabin, cleared out the old tools and dust, made space for a bed the boy could call his own. The summer had begun to fade. Mornings came cooler now, the light softer, the grass tinged with gold. The town appeared over the ridge, a scatter of buildings along a single dirt street, storefronts bleached by sun, horses tied to rails, people moving between shadows. Elias felt Kaya tense beside him. "Just look straight ahead," he said. The buckboard rolled into town. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A woman in a blue dress pulled her child closer. A man on the boardwalk lowered his newspaper and stared. Elias kept the horse at a steady walk. He did not slow down. He did not speed up. The general store sat at the center of the street, its wooden sign creaking in the breeze. Elias pulled the buckboard to a stop and set the brake. The silence pressed in from all sides. He climbed down first, turned and offered his hand to Kaya. She took it. Her fingers were cool and dry against his palm. She stepped down, then lifted Nahuel after her. The boy stood close to his mother, his eyes moving across the watching faces. "Stay close," Kaya murmured. They walked to the store. Elias pushed open the door, the bell jangling overhead, and stepped inside. The store owner, a thick man named Hendricks with a bald head and flour-dusted apron, looked up from behind the counter. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, something harder. "Stone. Hendricks." Elias nodded toward the shelves. "Need some supplies? Flour, salt, coffee, beans if you got them." Hendricks did not move. His eyes stayed on Kaya, on Nahuel, on the beads at her throat. "Didn't know you were bringing company. Didn't know I needed permission." The silence stretched. Elias felt the weight of it, the pressure of all those watching eyes. Then Hendricks shrugged. "Your money's good as anyone's." He reached for the flour bin. "How much you need?" Elias let out a breath he had not known he was holding. They moved through the store, gathering supplies. Kaya kept Nahuel close, one hand on his shoulder. The boy's eyes darted from shelf to shelf, taking in the jars of candy, the bolts of fabric, the tools hanging on the back wall. A woman entered the store, Mrs. Patterson, gray hair pinned beneath a bonnet. She stopped when she saw Kaya. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, too fast for Elias to read. Then Mrs. Patterson nodded, once, small but there, and moved to the counter. "Morning, Mr. Hendricks. I'll take a pound of sugar when you're finished there." Hendricks grunted and kept weighing flour. An old man stood near the window, white beard down to his chest, black leather bag in his hand. Dr. Morrison. He had doctored half the territory and buried the other half. He walked closer. His eyes, pale blue, sharp despite his age, moved over Kaya and Nahuel. "This the woman and child folks have been talking about. This is them," Elias said. Morrison nodded slowly. He looked at Nahuel, at the color in the boy's cheeks, the clarity in his eyes. "Fever broke. Week and a half ago. Good. Morrison reached into his bag and pulled out a small bottle. Willow bark tincture. Stronger than the raw bark. Give him a spoonful twice a day until it's gone. Just in case. He held out the bottle to Kaya. She hesitated. Then she took it. Thank you. Don't thank me. Morrison's voice was gruff, but something softened in his face. Thank whoever taught you to use sage and yarrow. That's old knowledge. Good knowledge. Kaya's fingers tightened on the bottle. My grandmother, she taught you well. Elias paid for the supplies. Hendricks counted the coins and swept them into the drawer. Some of the watching faces had turned away. Others still stared. A few Mrs. Patterson. An old farmer by the door. A young woman with a baby on her hip gave small nods as they passed. Not acceptance. Not yet. But something. They loaded the supplies into the buckboard. Elias climbed up and took the reins. Kaya sat beside him. Nahuel between them. The ride back was quiet. Nahuel fell asleep halfway there, his head resting against his mother's arm. Kaya watched the passing land, her face unreadable. When they reached the cabin, Elias pulled the buckboard into the yard and set the brake. He climbed down and began unloading the supplies. Kaya carried Nahuel inside. When she returned, Elias was stacking the flour and beans on the porch. The old man, she said. The doctor. He was kind. Morrison's been around a long time. Seen a lot. He don't judge folks by where they come from. Not everyone is like him. No. Elias straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers. But some are. And that's enough to start. The autumn came slowly, day by day. The leaves on the cottonwood turned from green to gold. The mornings grew crisp, the evenings long. Nahuel learned to ride the old mare, his small hands gripping the reins, his face bright with concentration. Kaya worked the garden, coaxing the last of the squash from the vines, drying beans in the sun. Elias finished the second room, built a bed frame from pine, stuffed a mattress with dried grass and cotton. Nahuel slept there now, rust curled at his feet. The cabin grew fuller, warmer. The silence that had pressed in for 3 years gave way to something else, footsteps, voices, the creak of the rocking chair, the clatter of pots on the stove. One evening, as the sun sank behind the ridge and the first stars pricked the sky, Kaya came to Elias on the porch. She held something in her hands, the silver concho belt. I told you I would give you everything I have. She held it out, both hands flat beneath it. This was my mother's and her mother's before her. It is all I have left of them. Elias looked at the belt. The silver was worn smooth in places, the designs nearly rubbed away by generations of hands. I can't take that. It is a debt. There's no debt. He closed her hands around the belt, pressing her fingers against the cool metal. You already gave me what I needed. Kaya frowned. I gave you nothing. You gave me Nahuel. Elias looked toward the cabin, where the boy slept in the room Elias had built. You gave me a reason to get up in the morning. You gave me something I thought I'd lost. Kaya's eyes shone. That is not nothing, Elias said. That's everything. She lowered the belt. Her hands trembled slightly. You are a strange man, Elias Stone. You said that before. It is still true. A smile ghosted across her face. They sat together on the porch, watching the night come. Rust lay at their feet, muzzle on paws. Inside, Nahuel stirred in his sleep, murmured something, and went quiet again. The stars emerged one by one, mattered across the darkening sky. My people say the stars are the campfires of those who came before. Kaya's voice was soft. They watch over us. Elias looked at the cottonwood tree. The two mounds beneath it were silver in the starlight. My wife used to say the same thing, Annie said. About the stars? Kaya turned to him. Then maybe they are watching together. The thought settled into Elias's chest, not sharp, not painful, just there, present. Nawel appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. I heard talking. He padded onto the porch, bare feet quiet on the boards. Can I sit with you? Kaya lifted him onto her lap. He leaned against her, small and warm, his eyes on the sky. Elias, he said, will you teach me to fix the fence tomorrow? If you want. I want. The boy's voice was sleepy but certain. I want to learn everything. Elias looked at the child, at the mother, at the cabin with its lamplight spilling through the window, the smoke rising from the chimney, the dog stretched out on the boards. He thought about the woman who had walked out of the desert, carrying something heavier than she could hold alone. He thought about the choice he had made, the door he had opened, the life that had flowed through it. Some choices changed everything. Some people came to you exactly when you needed them. And sometimes, the thing you thought you had lost was just waiting for you to find it again. The stars burned overhead, the coyotes sang from the ridges, and three people sat together on a porch, watching the night, belonging to each other in a way none of them had expected. Elias reached out and rested his hand on Nawel's head. Everything, he said. We'll start tomorrow. Some stories leave a quiet weight behind. This one may have done that for you. The kind that settles in the chest without asking permission. The way evening settles over a valley when the work is done and the lamp is lit. Many of us know what it is to carry something alone, to walk a long way without knowing if anyone will answer when we finally knock on a door. Some of us have been the one knocking. Some of us have been the one deciding whether to open. Perhaps you know what it feels like to give shelter to someone the world has turned away, or to receive it when you had stopped expecting kindness. Perhaps you remember a moment when a stranger became something more, not through grand gestures, but through small ones, a cup of water, a hand offered, a door left open. It is all right if this story stays with you a while longer. It does not need to be explained or resolved. Some things simply rest where they land, and that's enough. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening.